Hey everyone, I'm Stephen W. Long. This is The Writing Life, and you may recognize my guest today because she's been on here a couple of times before, my friend Karen Huntsberger. The reason that she's been on is this is your third book, and naturally that's what we want to talk about. But before we get there, can you just kind of run us by the first two?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on the show again.
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful to be here.
Actually, let me interrupt you. We've been working on this a while, haven't we?
Working on, getting me on the show
Getting you on the show because when you were in the process of writing, I thought that might be fun to talk about that process. How do you do that? And I think you were...
Reluctant?
Let's use that word.
Reluctant.
But you're here now.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, my first two books, Waiting for Peace, I published 10 years ago.
Has it been that long?
It's 10 years ago, 2015.
Yeah.
And that's nonfiction. The first two are nonfiction.
Right.
And that one was 5 years in the making, and it changed my life dramatically. I've given over 60 book talks to groups big and small, and that's been fantastic, almost exclusively. The second one is also, that took about 2 years, but it was 3 years before it was published in 2018. I'll Be Seeing You. My aunt was in the Navy waves. And that, COVID really cut that ability to speak to people. About the time I was ready to start doing book talks, COVID cut the ones that I had scheduled short. So what's been really different is those two are nonfiction, and this one is historical fiction. The new one, Dear Nora.
Right.
And I came to write this one because I've spent 15 years now in World War II, which surprises me. I never thought I would do that. But one of the things that really struck me at these book talks is so many people wanted to tell their own family story. Right. And PTSD was a big part of it. So I wanted to write about PTSD.
Yeah.
And I didn't waste the pandemic while I was sitting at home trapped.
Right.
And I started working on this book during the pandemic. And I wanted to figure out how to talk about PTSD through characters, not real people, but
almost an amalgam, though.
Amalgam,
yeah.
The main character, Nora, is an amalgamation of many nurses.
Yeah.
And so I read numerous memoirs. My World War II library book collection keeps extending.
Right.
And Red Cross memoirs, because the Red Cross workers, they were amazing people. And you have to remember that all of these people were ultimately volunteers. They did not, they weren't drafted.
Sure.
And so
again, when you say these people, the nurses.
The nurses, excuse me, yes. And so I decided to write about PTSD through the eyes of a neuropsychiatric nurse. And she serves in 2 U.S. Army hospitals, the first one in Wales, and the second one in England. And then she ends up at a transient camp where released, what we now call POWs, they called them RAMPs then, which stands for Released Allied Military Personnel. And that's was the...
so they would be...
soldiers.
They're not the enemy?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah. And so it was released prisoner of war camps that were mostly American soldiers, but there were also soldiers of many nationalities in these camps. But they were generally segregated, but they were self-segregated because of language barriers.
Sure.
So anyway, that's how this one came to be.
Okay, let me back you up just a minute.
Okay.
I know these things, and I think you may be skipping ahead a little bit. Talk about the characters in these books. Who are they? And because you've got a kind of a leg up when it comes to talking about military medical folks.
Right. Waiting for Peace, this first book, my dad was a World War II combat medic in European theater. He was in Germany and France, to begin with. And the reason that book came to be is after my mother died and cleaning out his house, or her house, excuse me, their house, there were all these letters, over 200 letters to and from him during World War II.
What a treasure trove.
What a treasure trove.
Yeah. And I mean, for you, and we'll get into that, but I'll come back.
And so, but it was months before I could get to reading them. And then when I started reading, I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
I was standing in the hall reading them. I was like, oh, I need to go do something. I'm
Yeah.
standing here reading this.
Yeah.
Because most of us don't get the opportunity to know our 22-year-old parent,
Right. Right.
And so I spent a lot of years compiling that, transcribing the difficult to read letters. And he kept a war journal. And the soldiers were discouraged from doing that because if they were captured, it could reveal locations.
Okay.
But because he was a medic and he had various things in his pockets, he had these tags, almost like if you would take clothing to the dry cleaner.
Sure.
That they might tie a tag on it or pin it on. They put these on the soldiers that were removed from the battlefield. They'd tie it onto their
To identify
belt
them.
loop or a button to state what treatment they'd already had.
Okay.
And so my dad, being a frontline combat medic, then the men would be transferred to what's called the forward aid station. And then they get moved farther back. They might end up on a hospital train to an army hospital in the closest army hospital, whether it was in France or England.
Okay.
So does that make more sense?
It fills it in. Now, what about the other one?
Okay, and I'll be seeing you. My aunt, the great thing about this book for me was that she was one of the very first women to serve in World War II. By the time the war was going for quite a while, they were running out of men. Over 16 million Americans served in World War II, which is...
It's an incredible number.
It's a horrible number.
Yeah.
And then you also think the 63 nations were involved. And you think, okay, this is just global insanity. Absolutely.
World War.
Yeah, World War is, totally. And so they were running out of people to do the work. And so then it was proposed that women have a women's Army Corps was the first one.
Right.
There were already women who came to be known as WASPs, Women's Air Service Pilots. And they were already women pilots in the United States who ended up volunteering to do this and ferrying planes back and forth across the United States.
Yeah.
And then those planes were either flown or shipped to the South Pacific or the European theater. And so Lucy, my aunt, the letters are one-sided. In Waiting for Peace, the letters are to and from my dad. In Lucy's book, it's only her letters home. And she was a school teacher, and she hated it. So she volunteered.
She hated teaching?
She hated it. Well, because there were so many people away at war, all those men teachers, they were left with so many many fewer teachers in schools.
Sure.
And she was overworked, and so when the opportunity came to join the WAVES, which is the Navy component, and it stands for Women Activated for Voluntary Emergency Service. And you note the emergency. The plan all along was that these women who served, after they were done, they'd go back home.
Right.
And they wouldn't keep these jobs. And so learning, she saw this as an opportunity to get out of something that she hated.
Okay.
And then she was in the WAVES and she loved it. And she was a map artist in Washington, D.C. And the Hydrographic Office, which provided over 2 million maps during the few years of the war there.
Yeah.
She would make the tiny corrections on them, and most of these were in the South Pacific because the South Pacific had not been explored in the same way that the waters off Europe and had been explored.
Where did that information come from?
Well, interestingly
to make
enough,
the correction.
To make the correction. There's another great book by a friend of mine whose name is Kate Musumeci. She wrote a book called Lethal Tides, and it's about the woman who was the head of the Hydrographic Office, who revolutionized how that information was gathered. And so it's a fantastic read, it's all true.
Sure.
About how they determined that, because when troops first went to Japan, they would not know what the tides were like. They weren't know what the beach was like. So many, many men died this way, just because of bad information. And so lots of this information was acquired by nighttime reconnaissance to get in there when the enemy. And so the work of the Hydrographic Office, the maps, believe it or not, saved a lot of people's lives.
Oh, sure.
And so that's a fascinating book too. But her name was Mary Sears, and before that, the woman who was the Hydrographic Office head, she had worked at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, so she already had massive information.
Massachusetts, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of her family members are still living, and they helped inform my colleague who wrote this book, my author friend.
Okay.
Lethal Tides, and so,
Okay.
yeah.
We're going to get to Nora.
Okay.
But your dad eventually became a minister?
My dad became a minister. He started out to be a doctor, and he was in school, he was in college to be a doctor. And when he was drafted, they thought he's already got a considerable amount of knowledge, so they sent him to Darnell General Hospital, which is in Kentucky. And he worked actually in psych wards there. He wrote about these men. He said these men are sick in their mind. You know, that soldiers that had already come back and were mentally injured by war. And so he got that experience. He wrote about loving to be allowed in surgeries and getting to see an amputation and how cool that was. But being in actual war and having to deal with the worst you can possibly see in terms of injuries.
Right.
He came back home and he said, I'm not touching medicine again. He didn't know what he was going to do. He knew he was anti-war.
Yeah.
And he was an anti-war activist the rest of his life. And he decided to become a minister. And he was home for a while, sort of floundering around after the war, but who wouldn't be floundering around after the war?
Sure.
And that suddenly came to him. So he and my mother had been dating, and then within a month, you know, he said, let's get married. And they got married, and then they went off to school for him to get his divinity degree.
Okay. So you'd mentioned something that I've thought a part of this question, but not the other part, which you just mentioned, and that is reading handwriting. So two things. I never thought about the difficulty, maybe, of reading someone's handwriting, which you had to do, but then I think the word is epistolary. There's no narration here, right? There's just letters back and forth or letters from her. Nevertheless, I think you probably edited some of these.
Oh yes, but the letters in both Waiting for Peace and I'll Be Seeing You are edited, definitely.
Yeah.
For me as the compiler of these information, some of it was just boring. Why do we need that in there? Right?
Sure.
So,
okay.
But I have never known if it's epistolary or epistolary. I got to find that out.
Oh, okay.
But it's books that are written in letters. And letters to me are very intimate. I've talked about this before, I think, when I was on the show before, that it's a real person's experience. And so I decided to write this new book, Dear Nora, in epistolary form. And there's three main characters in that book, Nora being the main character, who's the nurse, her mother back home in southern Indiana, and her best friend, who's also in the same town as the mother.
Yeah. A couple of things. I wondered what the appeal was of that approach, and you just told us. When I've read the other two, and folks, from the bottom of my heart, I love these. and I've told you on many occasions, I love your family. I fell in love with your family through these. But when it came to a novel, because I got to read an advanced copy, I feared that it would lack setting. And by setting, I mean in a novel, you know, the sights and sounds and smells and so on. It doesn't lack that because the people talk about it in their letters. And I thought you did just a great job on that.
Thanks very much. You know, what's interesting about it is, you know, they always say, write what you know.
Yeah.
Okay? I know southern Indiana really well from having grown up in Indiana and traveling around it a lot and experiencing that way of life, you know, post-World War II. I'm a baby boomer generation.
Right.
But then I did not know the setting, particularly where I placed Nora in England. So I studied it extensively. And I studied the history of the two real hospitals that she worked at. I went there last year. I went there, and this building, Knoxon Hall, right here is a ruin now. But
Oh.
it was built originally in
There you
this
go.
particular building in 1840. But it suffered a devastating fire in 2004.
Oh dear.
But they still consider it of major architectural significance.
Yeah.
So it's not been torn down. All these 150 hospital buildings that the U.S. Army put up there, these long buildings, concrete buildings that
Right.
they had all the wards in and the beds, and they're deteriorating in the woods there. I mean, the woods will take over, blackberries will take over, stinging nettles everywhere,
Yeah.
and so I studied that area extensively. I found everything I could on it, and it was a real thrill to go there. In fact, there's this beautiful church right next to it that was built by one of the residents of this home when her husband died. Next to it, she had this church built as his memorial, and inside his sarcophagus with a full him lying in repose, I mean, in marble, which is something we never see in the United States. In Europe, you see it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's generally only royalty or somebody that was high up there.
You can imagine the cost for one thing.
The cost.
Yeah.
Well, there was no lack of money here. So when
Yeah.
the first thing we saw when we got to this property was the church, and I actually burst into tears. I had studied it so much.
Yeah.
And the sweet graveyard that's there, and it's a small area, but it's outside of Lincoln, England. And I knew about Lincoln, England because my husband had taught study abroad there twice.
Yeah.
So he was familiar with that area, so it was more comfortable to go and visit there because he knew some things. But I mostly just did my own research,
Sure.
with our, on the internet. There's amazing things that you can find.
You bet. Shift gears just a little bit. I know that the focus of the focus of this is PTSD, and yet that has not been the feedback that you're getting. Is that?
That's right. Only one person has said something to me, and she is a psychologist.
Yeah.
And I do have a disclaimer in the frontispiece page saying that this book is about PTSD, but I tried to handle it sensitively. But for people that this might be a trigger for, maybe
Be aware.
Be aware. Although it's handled very delicately, and the only person that said anything about it all is the psychologist who's read it. And her statement was, "I like how you handled that."
Oh, great.
Because it is a deeply sensitive topic, and the manifestations of it are many and varied.
I experienced that through my dad, who was in World War II, and partly stories, mostly stories, but then loud noises would send him off.
Right.
That's one thing. I wanted to talk to you too about the anxiety that the folks back home experienced, and a component of that is relative to today, how slow communication was.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit
Sure.
about that?
And that's one of the things that I experienced definitely in the first book is it often took 4 to 6 weeks for a letter to arrive.
Yeah.
They couldn't phone. Soldiers today, they have cell phones. They
Oh,
can
yeah.
do FaceTime with their family back in the United States. At this point in time, you couldn't even send a telegram unless it was some absolutely desperate, urgent thing,
Right.
like they would sometimes let people go home if their parent was dying.
Yeah.
But that was the only way a telegram would be used. They were reserved for military use in general. And so when you think about these letters taking weeks to go back and forth, a person might have written home to their parents saying, "Oh, I've got this big problem," and then the parents get it a week later and they have all this anxiety a month later, and then it's another month before their child
Is it
in Europe
resolved or not, or-
gets it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that is really brought up in these letters because there's a lot of anxiety anyway. The town that I modeled the southern Indiana town on had 8.4% of their population was serving during World War II. That's a huge amount of people
Sure.
gone from a little town.
Sure.
And that was about 2,000 people. And of those, 137 died, but of course numerous ones of them were injured.
Yeah.
30 of them were women. And at the time, it was considered, having the women go into the military was a big, horrible fight in Congress. people didn't think it was right for women to be serving in those roles.
Yeah.
Well, that they had to change their views on that, and women contributed a lot.
Out of necessity.
Yeah, 347,000 women served from the United States.
Yeah.
But the anxiety at home, of course, was coupled by having your sons away at war, and then if your daughters went too and
Sure.
served as nurses or in the Army, Women's Army Corps or the Waves. Generally, those the Waves were always safe. They weren't put in combat areas, and the Women's Army Corps wasn't either. But nurses definitely were
Sure.
in combat areas.
Sure.
And so the anxieties plus rationing, and not only rationing in the United States, but rationing in Europe, and even the soldiers' food got rations at times
Sure.
because of just availability and getting it to where it was needed. But there was all kinds of anxiety, and when you think about a town with most of the men being gone,
Yeah.
most one of the character mother writes, "There's not a man between 18 and 35 to be seen in this town.
Right.
They're all away."
Right.
And so that leaves a lot of children growing up without fathers present. And there's lots of social issues that happen. Of course, when soldiers
Sure.
come home from war, it's such a transition.
Well, your aunt, I mean, you didn't say this directly, but I think she was a teacher, and the people who were left to teach were primarily women or 4F, maybe?
4F,
fellows who couldn't
Right,
or were not acceptable.
right, who didn't meet the qualifications for either physical or other reasons to be in the military. So anyway.
You
But-
talked about rationing. I don't think I've said this on the program before, but I think it's sort of cute. So this is my rationing anecdote. In that period, somebody asked my grandmother why she had so much sugar. And she said she had to get it before the hoarders did.
Before the hoarders got it.
Yeah. So that's a mindset.
Yeah.
And one more thing about the communication. I wonder if, it's not a corollary exactly, but I know because it's so instant now and ubiquitous, I had heard a story about Nellis Air Force Base, which is just outside of Las Vegas, and fellas there would go to work in the morning and on the screen fly a drone over Afghanistan and drop their ordnance and then go home for dinner. And that's completely the opposite of maybe being immersed. Well, so I had heard that at the end of the war, military folks were separated and they had the boat ride back, the Queen Mary. And so you had some period of time to reacclimate, or at least leave that behind. And I don't know what it does to you inside when you're fighting during the day, even though it's fighting with a joystick and a screen, and then go home to your kids. I don't know.
Well,
It's not good.
In my view, it's, of course, completely wrong.
Yeah.
My whole effort with all three of these books is anti-war.
Sure.
Continuing what my father did. I do think that, when you mentioned the boat ride home, at the end of World War II, that was a big issue of getting people home. And
Right.
there's books written about
Right.
it.
Well, you touch on that here, I think.
Well, because
There's a delay.
I talk about it because all
Yeah.
the prisoners of war got to go home first
Right.
because they had suffered.
Yeah.
So the military men that had been prisoners, some of them for the entirety of the war, and some of them hadn't seen a woman for years, or fed decently. Many of them lost
Right.
up to 60 pounds in
Right.
these prison camps. That just reacclimating to food was a huge issue, and I speak to that in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And then they shipped them home when they thought that their stomachs could handle it in case guys got seasick. If your stomach is already
Yeah.
destroyed from malnutrition, it takes a while to build up. But then the men doubled up. They doubled up the amount of people that were on these returning ships, so that 12-hour ships, some guys, had the bunks for 12 hours,
Right.
and then they had to stay out of there for 12 hours where
Right.
the other half
Right.
of the guys slept.
Right.
But that was the sacrifice, and of course, if you were going home, that was a very easy sacrifice to make.
Yeah. Another anecdote, my dad was in the South Pacific and got malaria, and he lost so much weight. He said he came down the stairs one day I think it was in a hospital. And at the landing where you turn, there was a mirror. And he saw himself and said, "Hey, how you doing?" He didn't recognize himself. And when he got home, the thing that he wanted was a chocolate malt. And so he ordered 2. And he couldn't drink one.
No.
So, yeah. It's back. I've got a question for
Sure.
you. One of the characters here is Mother. I believe I'm correct. She's not named. Is that right? She's just Mother.
Well, she's only named once.
Is she? I missed that.
Her name is Ellen.
Okay.
Actually, she's named twice. I have a who's who right in the front.
Okay.
And then she's named later in an obituary, actually, that occurs in the book. But yeah, she's just Mother.
And I thought that was authentic. I'm going to back up again. One is that's what Nora would call her, so that was organically correct. The other thing in all of these books that I thought you did such a great job is, yes, the communication takes a long time, but we, the reader, see everything. So if Mother is concerned about something, the answer to that concern may be on the way. We've read that letter, but she hasn't gotten it yet.
Right.
And so the timing, I love how the things are dated, and we're kind of back and forth. We know things that the characters don't yet.
And believe me, I can't tell you what a struggle that was.
Yeah, I can imagine the board.
I had the back of my office door.
Yeah.
At first, I put these giant butcher paper up there, and I would put when Mother sent a letter and when Nora sent it and when they got it, and
Right.
different colored pencil. Finally, I gave up and I did an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And then I added the third character, Louise. She wasn't originally in there.
Oh,
Because you don't tell your mother everything, right?
Right.
So Nora needed someone else to tell things to, where she could express her fear. She could talk about things that happened that she just didn't want her parents to know.
sure.
So that's why the third character came, and then I had to add another column to the spreadsheet. But and then it's easy to make mistakes in that, or make sure that they're answering any questions that they may have asked the other person.
Some writing advice I got from my mentor is never answer a dramatic question until you ask another one. And that lends itself to that. We're really close here, but I wanted to ask you, or comment, and then you can tell me how you think about this. Because of the subject matter, I think you've got 2 readerships. One is the general reader, which I would fall under, and again, I love the books. But then because of the military, you've had real opportunities to speak to those people. Can you just mention that a little bit?
Well, it's interesting because I've been on a Facebook page for years now. That's the Facebook page of the Nocton Hall people, but they're not the U.S. Army Nocton Hall people. They're the Royal Air Force came in there in 1946.
Okay.
And that stayed a military hospital and base until the 1970s. And so I've been following this Facebook page for 3 years, and I've learned lots of things from it.
Yeah.
But I posted on there the other day. I posted about the book, but then I'd never posted anything until I posted the book, a new novel with Nocton Hall as a setting. And that got some response, but then I posted a picture of the lane of sequoia trees that went up to the front of this Nocton Hall. I've got over 60 responses from that.
People recognize it.
People recognize that. They talk about it was the best post ever. I mean, it was a gorgeous estate. If you watch Downton Abbey, it's that kind of a thing, although not that big, but gorgeous plantings, just amazing place that's so beautiful. And it was very therapeutic for the soldiers who were recovering there to see beauty still in the world.
Yeah.
And that was one of the pluses of using estates. Many estates like this were used in Britain.
Right. I think that's going to have to do it.
Okay.
Oh,
great.
nuts. Well, I will say to folks, if you're looking for historical information, these are very accurate. I know you've done a lot of work on that, but just a great read and real humanizing. I think those 2 are real people. You wouldn't know that Nora's not.
She's very real to me
Yeah,
after
well,
all these years.
To me as well.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time on The Writing Life. Bye-bye. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.